Hey, what is up, everyone? This is Ete with another episode of Eco-Lawn Science. Today, I am so excited about this episode for a few reasons. Number one, I am in Oahu, Hawaii, in Laie, Hawaii. Number two, my special guest today has traveled the world in search of how to make things better for all of us. He's been more places than I can count, and most recently returned from Antarctica for an Airbnb sabbatical, which we'll get into. But I'm here with Dr. Spencer Ingley on the BYU Hawaii campus. Spencer, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Great to be here with you today.
All right.
Welcome to Hawaii. An aloha.
Aloha. There it is. I was waiting for that. So, and on top of all that, Spencer just happens to be my brother-in-law. So, there's that little connection there. So Spencer here, Dr. Ingley, is the assistant professor of biology at BYU-H. He got his bachelor's at the University of Florida, his PhD at BYU in Utah, and also a National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill. So not only does he have a really great resume, but the thing I love most about Spencer and his work is he's a real deep thinker, and he really cares. He cares so much about what we're doing with the environment, about the future for himself, for his children. And that's really why I wanted to do this interview and bring him into the discussion, because as this is Eco-Lawn Science, this is important to all of us, whether you're a service company out providing a service for for homeowners, or if you're a homeowner who's using products on your lawn. We really want to start getting you thinking more about what you're doing and just the purpose and the impact of everything that we do here. So let me fill you in. So Spencer and I were on the beach just 2 days ago, sitting out on a beautiful day, looking over the ocean. And I think you said, what was straight across that ocean? Was it China, Japan? Where are we?
Yeah, I guess actually looking in that direction, we were looking right towards California, right towards the mainland.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But I think what we were talking about, we're sitting at this beautiful beach, on this incredibly remote island. But oftentimes, and that was actually a pretty clean day on that beach, but oftentimes what we see, and I think this is maybe what we're talking about, is that, there's debris, there's trash and whatnot that washes up on the beach. It comes from all over the place, Asia, the mainland of the U.S. and whatnot. And I think that's what we were kind of talking about, in terms of like how we're so connected. And even though we're in this really remote spot, we're influenced by things that are going on in the outside world. Absolutely.
And you were even saying that here on this little island in the middle of the Pacific, where people are, for the most part, really focused on the environment, you get the brunt of everything that's happening across the oceans. Meanwhile, people here are trying to be more sustainable and think a little more forward. And that's how we got talking about how connected we are. So let's ask this. So we're going to start off with this. So you did just get back from Antarctica.
Yeah.
And I know there's some things we can't talk about all the details yet because of the press and the things that will happen.
Sure.
But can you tell us a little bit about why did you go there, and give us a little overview of what you were looking for and your overall feelings on what you felt?
Great. Yeah. So I just got back in the middle of December from a month-long sabbatical that was put on by Airbnb. It was well-known, sort of a travel company, and the Ocean Conservancy, which is a nonprofit, a non-government organization that does a lot of work developing science about the ocean, about ocean pollution in particular, and then also working with policymakers and companies to try to create a cleaner ocean environment, basically. And so the whole point of this sabbatical was to go to, we spent some time in Chile in South America, and then also in Antarctica. And the whole point was, our goal was to study whether or not microplastics, these really small plastic particles, had arrived at the interior of Antarctica. So the reason that this is important is that this part of the world is literally the most remote part of the planet. So much so that when you get there, it feels like you're on another planet. It feels like you've unplugged from the rest of the world that you know and that you're familiar with and that you understand, and you're just walking on this foreign planet. And so what we were trying to do is determine whether or not microplastics had gotten there, for several reasons, but for one really important reason, just to illustrate how how challenging this issue has become and how deep this issue of plastic pollution has become. If there is plastic in the middle of the most remote, most isolated, most uninhabited, inhospitable continent on the planet, then we've got a problem, right? We're doing something wrong. And so we were that was really kind of the last frontier in terms of understanding where microplastics, these little shards of plastics have arrived. And so our goal was to go out and to survey these areas and figure out what was there and sort of get a baseline understanding of, in these remote areas that are really not affected by human activity in the area. I mean, these are places where people have never been before. Right. Are we seeing signs of human activity even in these areas that are so remote? And then to try to understand what the source of that pollution is, to try to cut it off, to try to understand what's there, understand what might get there in the future, because those plastics, that plastic pollution ends up being a really big threat to a lot of different ecosystems, both in that area, in the Southern Ocean, in Antarctica, and then also across the world as it kind of spreads across the world. That was our main goal, was to understand, to sort of collect that type of data, and then to go out and to be ambassadors on this issue across the globe. So there were 5 different participants who went on the sabbatical, who were selected from over 140,000 applicants from 200 countries. And all of us were from really different backgrounds, but what we all had in common was a passion for the environment, a passion for this issue of plastic pollution, and a way to get that message out. So we had people who were climate change educators in India. We had someone who was a sustainability director for an international multi-billion-dollar crop nutrition company. We had somebody who was an outreach coordinator for the World Wildlife Fund. So we had these people who were really passionate and had a way to get out there and share the message.
Just a really great team.
Once they were inspired, a really awesome team that kind of came together from many different backgrounds, many different regions, really an international group. And the reason that I think that was also really important is because this is an international problem. This is a problem that we all face as a human race. This isn't a problem that individuals face or that individual countries face, but this is a problem that the entire planet is facing. And the nature of the problem, because it is global, needs a global solution. It needs attention at the global level.
Obviously, I know you said some of the research is going to be in progress. It will take time to be determined.
Sure.
What was so here you are in Antarctica, right? Not many people get to go there. I mean, really neat experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a team of essentially scientists and this crew and a film crew, you're down there in this, like you said, the furthest place on the planet. Feels like another planet. What was your takeaway? Did you have big insights that really impacted you or changed the way you see things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, for one, I went there as an ecologist, as somebody who's really interested and concerned about the environment, for the sake of the health of the environment. But also, I went there as a dad and as a husband and as a family man, as somebody who cares about people. And oftentimes when I think about environmental issues in the past, I tend to view things in a pretty pessimistic way. I think myself as a realist. I feel like I understand the depth of the problem, and that makes me terrified.
Sure.
And I have kind of a bleak outlook just because I know how bad things have gotten. But going down there and working with the people that I worked with and seeing, the amazing things that they had accomplished, meeting people down at this camp in Antarctica, many of our guides especially were really inspiring people. These were people who had summited, Mount. One of our guides, he was from Nepal. He's climbed Mount Everest 17 times. Wow. There was another guy that we just casually met at breakfast one day who had climbed the highest summit on all 7 continents 7 times each. People who had skied across, Greenland. People who were skiing to the South Pole. People were doing all these incredible things. This guy who was skydiving with a wingsuit on Antarctica, and that was like a world record. He'd done it on all 7 continents. I mean, people were doing these incredible things, And coming from really incredible backgrounds, and what that inspired in me was a sense of optimism. This idea, that we can, humans can accomplish amazing things.
Yeah.
And we've done that in many different situations. In this case, when we're thinking about, pollution, we've done amazing things in terms of creating the amount of pollution, amazingly bad things.
Yeah.
But I think, we have that same capacity to turn off the tap, so to speak, to stop flooding our oceans with plastics, to stop flooding our atmosphere with pollutants, with excess carbon dioxide. We have that capacity to reverse that. And we have that capacity if we believe in it, and if we believe there's an issue and recognize that there's a problem, we can turn that around really quickly. And so I left with that kind of sense of hope and optimism in sort of the human, in human abilities. And also I left really thinking about, whereas before maybe I focused a lot on the environmental issues, I left thinking a lot more about how those environmental issues affect people and affect the people that we love. Because in reality, all we're trying to do and all I want is to create a better world for my own family right now and also in future generations. And I want that for everybody. I want that for my, people I don't really get along with. I want that for people I've never met. I want that for, our quote unquote enemies. And I think we've done a lot of things to put us on a track where, we're not providing that for our future generations. And I think we need to all really focus on changing that course so that future generations can have the ability to enjoy life the way that we have and enjoy a happy, healthy, productive life.
And I love that. I love what you said because, like you said, when you've spent your life on the environmental side and you have this data that's put in front of you all the time, and you're looking and you're going, this is scary stuff.
Yeah, terrifying.
And I think, for a lot of people, our show is hosted out of a little Heber, Utah, and we're in some ways very disconnected in the mainland versus here on this little island where you need the earth every day. You're reminded of how connected you are to it.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking that for you to say you actually left that and the situation with a positive spin, I love hearing that, because I feel like for a lot of people who are not very plugged into what's going on in the environment, there seems to be a wall, right? Like, there's your environmentalist, don't come talk to me, that kind of attitude.
Right.
And I think your approach, for me anyway, it's breaking that down and saying, okay, we've kind of created a mess, but you are more optimistic and hopeful than ever is what I'm hearing, that we can fix it.
Yeah. And
that's powerful.
Yeah, no, and I think, one thing about living in Hawaii and also going down to Antarctica is that you really get to understand that you are completely at the mercy of the elements, especially in Antarctica. I mean, we're going out in places where, most of these places we were going out and collecting, we had the rope up and we had, harnesses and everything. We were grouped together in these big teams, these long lines, so that if one of us fell in a big crevasse, then we could, pull each other out. We had to take all these precautions with, the weather, with the climate and whatnot, because we were literally just at the mercy of nature. And here in Hawaii, it's the same. I mean, we live a few hundred feet from the ocean. At any time, there could be an earthquake, there could be a tsunami, there could be a hurricane that comes through, there could be mudslides, there could be flash floods, and we're just at the mercy of the elements. And for me, being exposed to that and thinking about that really helped me to feel connected with nature. And I think that is a big challenge, is that people in many places around the world have become disconnected from nature. We're plugged in constantly, to technology, to social media, to this digital entertainment. We're in our climate-controlled houses and our office buildings, and we leave them and we get into a climate-controlled car and we drive, back home, and then we sit on the couch and, we're just disconnected. We're unplugged from nature. We don't realize oftentimes that when we're eating our dinner, when we're eating, a chicken dinner or a salad or whatever, that there was life and that there was energy and that there was effort that went into creating those different items. We put a dollar value on everything and we think about things in terms of the dollar, But there's so many other costs that are associated with all of our different actions, and many of them are environmental. And when we're disconnected from that environment, we don't really see those costs quite as much. And I think that's been a huge challenge in modern societies, that people become disconnected from, where their food comes from, disconnected from, understanding their reliance on nature. And then that oftentimes causes people to behave in a way that's detrimental to nature. So I think reconnecting people with nature and understanding how they are connected. We're not apart from, we're a part of nature, and we rely on it.
And you're dead on. I mean, for example, my listeners know I live in Utah, right outside of Park City. It's a place of affluence. It's a place of just, in so many ways, what we're talking about. It's the epitome to me, and I hope I'm not offending anyone, but I'm just trying to be honest, because I feel like I am trying to reconnect to nature. My father came from a little island in the Pacific, further than here. He grew up, catching fish and eating bats, right? I grew up in this situation you're talking about. So it's not that I've purposely turned my back to become this way. It's all I know. Yeah. But lately, as we have these conversations, I have a desire to reconnect, to turn back. And I know I'm not alone. I know there are a lot of great people out there who just haven't had the chance or the understanding, how do I connect back to nature? So what could you say to those people like me, or like the people I brought up earlier who may hear the word environmental and just shut off? Yeah. What's an encouraging small way for us to start reconnecting that you think would be beneficial?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's key for wherever we live to try to get out into nature and to it's corny, but stop and smell the roses, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Metaphorically speaking and literally, stop and take a minute to take in nature around you. And if you're living in a city, if you're living in a place where there isn't a lot of nature, maybe there's hopefully there's green spaces that you can get out into. You can enjoy the sound of the birds and the rushing water and the leaves and whatnot. But I think really just getting out into nature as much as possible. There's a lot of other benefits to that. I mean, not only connecting you with nature and helping you feel more a part of that system, but there's health benefits, there's psychological benefits to being out in nature and to sort of, there's different terms and different ways of doing this, but there's one that I always hear that's kind of an interesting concept. I think it comes from Japan, of like forest bathing, where it's kind of this rough translation, but this idea of kind of being out in the forest and like bathing yourself, just like letting that, not actually taking a bath, but
nobody take a bath.
You could, maybe there's a bath out there, but the point is you're just kind of letting the experience and the environment just kind of wash over you, right? To kind of cleanse you and cleanse your spirit and cleanse your mind. And so I would encourage people to get out as much as possible into nature. And I think another really important way to connect with nature is through our food. Try to, if you can, get a garden or participate in a community garden, or, go to a farmer's market, talk to people that are growing food, that are providing the food for you, and try to learn as much as you can about where that's coming from. And really quickly, you'll see that our food system is relying entirely on nature and natural processes, and good, healthy food relies on a good, healthy environment. And also, if you can't connect in those ways, there's a lot of other opportunities to connect and to sort of learn more about your reliance on nature. There's so many great nature documentaries. There's so much good information on the internet about, ecosystem services, things that, ecosystems provide for humans. And I think the more information people have about those things, the more inspired they'll feel, more inspired they'll be to make changes in their life that are more friendly towards the environment. Because in the end, that leads to more prosperity for us than ignoring the environment and sort of suppressing it or extorting it in a way.
Right. So so a follow-up on that is, if you, now that we've talked a little bit about it, but if there was one thing that you feel like, you mentioned the garden, you mentioned the forest bathing, I love I can picture a visual, just taking that in. If there was one thing that, if I had 5,000 listeners and they were all hearing it tonight, Where could make the most difference if there was just one little thing to start? I know that's kind of I'm going a little deeper on,
Man, yeah. I think it probably depends on the individual. People connect with the environment in different ways. For me, when I am connecting the most with the environment is when, I like being alone a lot of times, and I love being alone in nature, whether that's, being out on the reef, snorkeling by myself and just kind of, being absorbed in that environment, sitting on, on a hill, somewhere out in the mountains, near my house, even just swinging on the hammock in my yard and just kind of taking in that nature, just really just taking a minute to, just kind of slow down and appreciate what's around us. I think that's so important. And just taking, meditation, which I know also kind of gets a weird, kind of a bad rap sometimes. But meditation, all meditation has to be is just taking, some quiet time to just kind of focus on what's around you, and focus on your connection with that thing around you. And I think that can be incredibly powerful. Just taking a few minutes a day to just sit and watch nature and take it in and smell it and breathe it and touch it and feel it and listen to it. That can make a huge difference.
I love it. So that's my challenge. Anybody who's listening is take the Dr. Ingley challenge that we just made up. Just take a few minutes, take 5 minutes, go out in nature and just pause and observe. Sure. and be part of it.
And that can be anywhere. I mean, even if you live in a city and you're watching a squirrel run around on an oak tree in the middle of a parking lot. I mean, anything like that, any small connection like that can be really powerful.
Awesome. So let me go back to, we talked a little about how connected we all are. Can you speak to us a little bit about, and I know some of these questions may not be what you've spent the last 2 decades studying, but I know that's your world. But we're talking about the connectedness of everything. And I really want to, as we were talking on the beach, even though I was in Utah, like I said, feeling a little bit disconnected from nature or from Hawaii or the rest of the earth, I'm thinking about the impact that we do on a local level in Utah, like a business or as a person, how it can impact people all the way in Hawaii. So we have some small businesses that listen to this show. We have homeowners. A lot are in the landscape space. Do you have any more to say on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways that, the earth is really just one big closed, living system. And even though we like to draw borders between nations, and even though we think of, borders between, even just like a terrestrial land habitat and like the ocean, I mean, really it's all connected. Everything really is connected. And I think one way, I encourage, of course, people as a professor, I try to teach my students about those connections, because sometimes you can't see them necessarily in your everyday life. You just have to learn, sort of what they are and what services the ocean is providing, for example, to people in Utah, this landlocked state that isn't anywhere near the ocean. But also, I think on a day-to-day basis, there's so many things that we can do that can improve the environment. And on the same token, there's a lot of things that we can do that degrade the environment, no matter where we live. So one example that I thought of the other day when we were on the beach, a lot of the pollution that's out in the ocean is actually related to fisheries. And so there are certain fisheries groups that go out there and they're catching their fish, and they do so in a way that's harmful to the fish populations, and also harmful to the environment, because oftentimes they'll cut their nets, they'll throw their trash overboard, all these different things that create, up to about half of the pollution that we find in the ocean is related to fisheries. And so, this is something that we all contribute to, even if we're not a fisherman, even if we're not literally cutting that net off the boat and tossing it in the ocean. If we're consuming fish, for example, that have been harvested in a way that contributes to this problem, we're contributing to that problem in a way. Wow. And so being really conscious about and trying to do research about, where our food's coming from, has this been, sustainably harvested? Has this been harvested in a way, is it coming from a country that has good practices when it comes to, to fishing, to doing aquaculture or, marine, fisheries or whatnot? I think it's important to dig in a little bit deeper and see how our buying practices can influence that. There's lots of other things. I mean, if you think about like, a shirt we buy. So you might go to a store and you might, if you're into new fashion and you go to, you're sort of involved in this fast fashion and you want the new style that comes out every month. A lot of those clothing items, they come from places, or they might come from places where the working conditions are not so great for the people who are making those items. Maybe the environmental restrictions are really, really relaxed in that area, and they're doing a lot of polluting. Maybe the working conditions are so dangerous that, there's maybe some big factory fire, people get hurt, people die. There's many things like that are sort of costs that are associated with products that we don't really see when we go to the store. We look at the price tag.
Yeah.
Or if we're buying food, we look at the price tag and we look at the nutritional facts. But there's also, there are other costs, social costs and environmental costs that come along with those different activities. And in that way, we're all connected to everything. When you buy a shirt that's made in Bangladesh or somewhere, you're connected immediately with that place. And
Wow.
and you're connected with and contributing to whatever those conditions are, good conditions or bad conditions. So finding companies that are doing good things for their society, for their community, for their environment, and encouraging those companies by giving them your business is a huge way that everybody can be involved in a solution. And one really good way to do that is by consuming, by buying local. Get to know the people that you're shopping from, that you're patronizing with your money. Are they doing good in the community? Are they doing good by the environment? Are they doing good with their employees? Are they, practicing, sustainable business practices that are not going to harm the world for future generations? And I think that's a lot easier to do when we're consuming local and when we're engaging with people at a local level. And we can become connected with them and sort of, see those costs, those external costs much easier and try to reduce those as much as possible.
I love what you're saying, this cost that we don't even notice, right? We go to buy a shirt and maybe it was sourced in China and like you said, the conditions were poor, but it's $5.
Sure.
Where I could get the same shirt made by my neighbor for $10.
Right.
And I'm going to go, wow, that shirt, that $10 shirt, that's double the price. They're nuts.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is there's other costs.
Absolutely. And
the connections that at the end of it, the $10 shirt may have actually been more affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When you think about,
wow,
these are called, they call them, this is the, the nerd term for it, but
nerd term,
nerd term alert. But it's an economic externality. Okay, so this is like something that just doesn't get factored into the cost. Mostly, it doesn't get factored into the cost of the business. Okay, the group that's doing business. It's not part of their cost equation, and so it doesn't get passed on to you as a consumer at the cash register, but it does get passed on to everybody in the form of, so like think of some factory. Let's say some factory's making whatever. Let's say it's making, this is eco-lawn science. Let's say it's making, some pesticide, or let's say it's making some, mineral, industrial fertilizer.
Okay.
If that factory, so that factory is taking into account all the costs, that it needs to create that product. It's looking at, energy costs. It's looking at the cost of water. It's looking at the employees, manpower and whatnot. And that's what gets factored into the price of that product.
Right.
But let's say that factory has, a pipe that's draining a bunch of toxic chemicals, a bunch of toxic, waste products out into the stream that's right behind that factory. That's creating problems for everybody in that area and potentially globally, right? Maybe we're wiping out the population of fishes in that stream, and that's going to affect people's ability to go out and recreate and to enjoy that stream. It's going to affect people that rely on that stream for food or rely on that stream for recreation or for drinking water or whatever. And so those are all costs that somebody has to pay that company isn't paying itself. And so oftentimes those externalities get passed on to us, to society, indirectly. and we've got to deal with it. Maybe there's higher healthcare costs now because we're being exposed to, you know, this pollution or whatever it is, or and that then, you know, contributes to our own expenses, but that company is never really held accountable for it. And so those are, it's really powerful to think about all of the costs, and oftentimes those aren't readily visible. It's hard to see those.
Yeah.
And it would be great if we could, right? It'd be great if there was like a little environmental cost and a social cost stamp, you know, on a product when we buy it, so we can take that into account, because oftentimes I think people would make the decision to consume, you know, maybe spend a little bit more to buy something that is having a better impact on the world around them.
Wow. And I love, like you're saying, really, you know, there's such a mindfulness throughout all this. Don't just buy stuff from the cheapest price. Don't just, you know, but look deep, look into the company, look into the locals, and really, I love what you said. If I buy a shirt, I think you said in Bangladesh, then I'm connected to Bangladesh.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm either good or bad making an impact over there. And I love this type of thinking. And yeah, I'm thinking how powerful it would be if everybody had this sense going into the decisions that we made from a business standpoint and from a homeowner standpoint.
And it's tough, right? Because at the end of the day, we, you know, for most of us, our budget's limited.
Right.
We've got to take care of our families. We're just trying to put food on the table. And so I think it's something that really, as a society, we need to look at, and we need to take, you know, make a really concerted effort to try to understand these costs, and to try to, you know, spread them out in such a way that, or to eliminate them if we can, right? Eliminate costly practices that are, you know, making some people a lot of money, but maybe causing a little bit of harm for a lot of other people. We need to take a look at those things, and we need to take action sort of collectively to try to avoid them, and then try to, you know, where costs are unavoidable, we should try to spread those out in such a way that not one particular group is being impacted in, you know, a disproportionate way.
Makes sense. How did we get this way? Because what I'm kind of hearing from you is we need to go back in time to when people used to be connected to their food and nature. I mean, that's all I'm hearing, really. Yeah. So where did we, in your opinion, and I know this isn't your focus of the studies and what you teach here at the university, but can you give us an idea what you think, how did we get this way? Like, why are we here?
You know what? It's a really complicated issue. I think, you know, and there's not one easy answer, and if there is an answer, it's not easy to hear. I think we, you know, in our society today, and I think in general, I think it's part of human nature, we crave convenience, right? We love convenience, and convenience in a lot of cases is great. You know, we've got a lot of really amazing technologies that save us a ton of time and afford us, you know, all this extra time and energy that we can put into things that we care about, right? I think part of the problem is we've kind of become lost as, you know, as a society in terms of what really matters. And we've had, you know, half a century or more of really intense marketing from companies whose really only goal, to be frank, is to make a profit. And that, when people are just focused on making money and just focused on making a profit, oftentimes they will disregard some of those other costs.
Lose their way.
Sometimes they'll lose their way. Sometimes they'll stretch the truth a little bit. Sometimes they'll make you think you need something that you really don't need. And so we've really fallen into that, I think, as a society. We've gotten kind of this line between wants and needs really blurred, and that's been really affected also by, you know, being bombarded 24/7 by companies trying to convince us that we need their product. And in many cases, we just don't need that product, and that product is just about convenience, or it's, in the end, oftentimes just about making that company money. And those companies aren't always creating real value, and value that can be shared across the society. And so I think in many cases, I mean, this is like a system-wide change that would have to happen. We need to focus on real value, right? We need to focus on what gives us real value in our life, and we need companies that create real shared value that's beneficial for everybody. And we need people to maybe not demand quite so much of their investments. If they're investing in some company, oftentimes what they're looking for is a return on that investment, right? And they want to maximize the return on that investment. But I think we need people who are going to be okay with maybe getting a little less money back and getting some other benefits to society, to the environment in return for their investment, right? We've got to kind of realign, I think, refocus our interests, our priorities, to create value that is going to last forever, and that isn't just this temporary gain that we've all become kind of locked into, right? We're all kind of thinking on this short-term scale of, maximizing our profit, maximizing our experience, maximizing our convenience, consume, and that doesn't really bring people happiness. I mean, there's plenty of studies that show that doesn't bring happiness, but we've been convinced that it does oftentimes by companies that really just want to create profit for their shareholders. And so I think we need companies that are doing more than that. We need companies that care about creating real value for the world and not just a good product, right? But we need companies that are doing other things, that are responsible and environmentally and socially, so that they're not creating all those external costs that are just becoming a burden on other people. We need companies that are going to take responsibility for those things and own up to it, and sometimes make some sacrifices that are for the common good.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. That is hard to hear, but that's good. I think it goes deep, and I love it. I think, like you said, that it's this is a much deeper conversation than just, in some ways, in just business. I mean, we're talking about personal decisions and
absolutely,
and finding, like you're saying, this real joy, finding things that matter, and finding out that real joy doesn't come from things that we can buy, consumerism.
Right. Yeah.
So you've given us some great ideas on small steps that we can take to get back, to get more in touch, to get more connected. And you've shared with us you're optimistic because there's so many great thinkers out there. There's so many people, and I agree. I feel the same way. Like I was telling you earlier, like I am a certain way, and I didn't choose to be a way as far as the consumer that I am. I just, like you said, I've been marketed to since I was a baby.
Yeah.
And so to wake up in my mid-30s and say, holy cow, how did I get here? I've got to change.
Right.
It's a little overwhelming.
Sure.
It's very overwhelming.
Definitely.
What do you do in those times when you feel overwhelmed with this, with all the information that you have? And like you said, you're feeling, I've got to change things for my future, and I've got to change things out of my own life. Do you ever get overwhelmed at times, and do you just kind of break it down in small pieces? Or how do you, for my listeners who are at the same time getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I definitely feel like becoming overwhelmed by the challenge that's in front of us is completely natural and very, very common. And so I think it's important to recognize that, first of all, if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. There are lots of people out there who want to make changes that are going to be beneficial for the future of humanity, that maybe they don't know how to start, maybe they don't know what to do in the big picture, but there are people that are out there and that want to make that change. And I think that's really important to recognize that, and to try to connect with those people, and to try to draw strength from those people, and to try to break, like you said, I think breaking it down into small steps that we can take is a really it's a huge step, right? Here's an example. So we're trying to cut back on the amount of waste that we generate in our household.
Okay.
Because waste is really, like, as an ecologist, like in a natural system, nothing's wasted, right? Everything's recycled, everything's reused, everything is cyclical. There's no waste. And so that concept is really something that humans have created in the past century or so, of just having more than we need. And to think about, like, buying having like packaging that we are purchasing and that we're spending all this money and time and energy to produce, and then we just throw it away and it gets buried in a landfill is just completely mind-boggling from an environmental, from an ecology perspective, because it's just unnatural. So we're trying to limit waste in our household. And so what my wife and I did, we go to, just big box stores a lot of times. We're on an island. 90% of our food comes from the outside world, which is, challenging when you're trying to limit the impact and buy local and everything. But we went through kind of our typical grocery list, and we identified what items create the most waste. Like which item has the most non-recyclable plastic wrapping. And we went through and we identified those things. We found things that would be easy to replace either by making them at home, making them from scratch, or buying them somewhere else. Maybe we pay a little bit more, but we could buy them somewhere else and get them without all that extra packaging. We can bring our own packaging. We can, whatever, they're packaged differently. And so that was a pretty easy exercise, but we really quickly identified a handful of things that we could change immediately. And we started to do that. And it feels great because we're putting less in the waste bin every week.
Wow.
And I think there's so many other little opportunities like that where we can just make really small changes that scale up to a really big impact. And, there's always memes I see on social media where things... there's a few different ones. Like, there's kind of this global movement to like get rid of plastic straws. And I've seen one where it says something like, it's only one straw, said 8 billion people. The point being, if we're all acting as though we're the only one contributing to a problem, and we're assuming that not, everybody else is going to behave responsibly, it's just me, then chances are everybody's going to behave that way. And then that impact is going to be huge. On the flip side of that, if we think of a positive thing, if everybody went out and planted a tree, or if everybody passed on a straw, or if everybody decided to walk to work one day or to carpool or whatever instead of driving by themselves, if everybody decided to turn up their AC, thermostat a couple degrees and use a little bit less energy there, then that positive impact is going to be massive. And so I think that there's a lot of power in that, and thinking about the power of individual decisions and the power of those decisions when they become scaled, right? And we have the ability to influence people around us for, in positive ways. We can share it, share our successes with our friends. We can, if this is something that brings us joy and brings us happiness and that we're excited about, we should talk to them about it with people. Share with them what we're doing, share with them how it's helping our lives, how it's improving our lives, how we think it's going to improve the environment. And we don't have to be like zealots, we don't have to be attacking people and whatnot and, guilt tripping people.
Exactly.
But focusing on the positive, right? Like this is something that I've been doing. This is something I've been doing that that makes me feel much better, that, that I understand has a positive impact on the world. And, check it out. Maybe you can try it out, right? And there's so many little things that we can do that can help us sort of get past that. We can almost feel like we're paralyzed sometimes, right, by how big that issue is. Yeah. But just taking those little steps and finding people that are taking those steps as well and sort of joining with them is a huge.
And I think for me that what you just said really hits it on the head. This idea of take the guilt out of it, because that's, to be honest, I've had a desire, and I make my own efforts with my company. Every year we have goals on an environmental level. We try to do better and better. But there's always this sense of guilt that I get a little overwhelmed. And I know, like, when I meet with some environmentalists, they really almost shame me. And what you're saying is this: we can work together in a positive way, everybody do a little thing. I think that's a great message. I honestly feel like that's the message that's going to get more people on board.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just a positive spin and just everybody working together.
Definitely. I mean, I agree. And I think, to think about the fact that we've gotten ourselves into these messes, which took a lot of engineering to do, right?
Yeah,
we did a lot of really cool stuff. We had a lot of really amazing advances in technology to get where we are today. We can turn around. We can do the opposite. We can use that same ingenuity to solve problems. And I think yeah, I think focusing on that positive angle is huge, because I think people really do get kind of paralyzed, and they think, well, shoot, if if the ship's sinking, I might as well just party it up, live it up while we're going down, right? But in reality, we should be looking for those holes to plug to keep that ship from sinking, and we can't do that if we're just incapacitated by that fear or that guilt.
Okay, well, I hope you guys have been listening and inspired like I have been today. I hope that after this episode, you're, if anything, excited. That's how I feel right now. Like I've mentioned as I'm talking with Dr. Ingley here, it's overwhelming, and the more I talk with him and realize the state that we're in, the situation we're in, it's almost a little more overwhelming and could possibly bring fear into me. But as we've talked about, that we have the power to change this. We can, just by little things, by getting more connected, taking it as advice, going outside, spend more time in nature, the forest bathing. Look at the small ways, like he mentioned with his wife, how they've gone through their grocery list and eliminated or sourced certain things that might have a lot of impact from less impact places. I'm excited that little steps, knowing that I can walk away and make a difference. And, if we have 1,000 listeners or 5,000 listeners, if everybody walks away from this and makes a little bit of impact, then I feel like I've done some good here today. Don't get down, just get out there and make a small difference and just do what you can. I hope this episode has had some impact on you. I want to thank you, Spencer, for taking your time out and letting me crash your office here.
My pleasure. I'm always happy. I mean, one of the reasons that I love doing what I do, teaching these topics, is that I want to share this knowledge with other people, because I want them to feel the same empowerment that I feel, and I want them to know that they can make a difference, and that unless they care as an individual, unless they care about this issue, unless somebody like them, unless somebody like you who's listening out there cares about this issue, nothing's going to get done. But at the same time, if you do care, then you can make a difference, and I'm always happy to talk about that.
Awesome, and thank you so much. And my last thought is for any of you that are listening that are in the service industry like myself, and you're out there, listen to what he said. He's encouraging people to get to know the companies. Look at their procedures. Look at the products they use, or whatever they're doing. Look at their footprint. And so if you're a service company like myself, as I'm hearing this in real time, I'm going, okay, I want to make this change. I want to do this. I want to offset this damage that we're doing. Again, it could be overwhelming, but just a little bit at a time. So I would encourage any of you other companies out there to just take his advice and what he said and just implement a little bit at a time. And together we can all really make a big impact. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with us tonight, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a great day.